I should have known something was wrong when the family ahead of us never came out. We'd been going to Hartwell's farm, corn maze every October since I was a kid. It was the same sprawling 10 acres, same rickety wooden watchtower in the centre, same hand painted signs promising the most challenging maze in 3 counties. What made this year different was that I was bringing my girlfriend for the first time, and the Hartwells had sold the farm. The new owners had expanded it. It was now 15 acres. They said they added authentic period scarecrows and historical accuracy, whatever that was supposed to mean. We entered at dusk, which was arguably my first mistake. The entrance fee kid couldn't have been more than 16. Tried to tell us they were closing soon, but we'd driven 2 hours and I kinda wanted to show off, prove I could navigate it in the dark. The family went in 10 minutes before us. Mom, Dad, 2 kids. I saw them take the left fork while we went right, and that was the last I saw of them. The corn was taller than I remembered, thick too. The stalks pressed in from both sides, and in the fading light, the leaves looked almost black. My girlfriend grabbed my hand. I could tell she was already regretting this. I could tell by how quiet she'd gotten. We made our first turn, then another. The watchtower should have been visible by now. I'd done this maze hundreds of times. You could always orientate yourself by the watchtower. "Where is it?" she asked. "They probably moved it. New owners, remember?" But I was lying. You can't really move a structure like that. It'd be like moving a barn. Anyway, we kept walking. The path seemed narrower than before, and I started noticing the scarecrows. They were everywhere, at intersections, in alcoves cut under the corn, standing silent, watching at dead ends. And they were wrong. Old-fashioned clothes, sure, but they were stained, dark stains down the front of their shirts. Their heads were burlap sacks, but the stitching looked like it had been done by hand, and pretty badly at that. Are they supposed to be historically accurate?" my girlfriend said, as she stepped in front of me. I looked closer. The scarecrow's shirt wasn't just stained, but it was torn, and there were dark spots on the ground beneath it, like something had been dripping. "Let's just keep moving," I said. We turned another corner and found ourselves in a small clearing. There were 3 scarecrows here, arranged in a triangle formation, and in the centre, a wooden sign: Hartwell Farm, established 1843, closed 1912. "I thought you said this place was running since you'd been a kid," my girlfriend asked. "Different farm, same lad, maybe?" But now my stomach was churning. The Hartwells had definitely owned this property since at least the 70s. I'd met the old man dozens of times. A sound cut through the quiet. A child crying. It was distant, but clear. "That's one of those kids," my girlfriend said. "You know, from the family." We followed the sound, taking turn after turn. The corn seemed to lean in closer with each step that we took. The crying got louder, then suddenly stopped. We emerged into another clearing. One of the scarecrows was wearing a Chicago Bears jacket. My girlfriend saw it the same moment I did. We both froze. The jacket was new. Well, not new, worn, but definitely modern. And small. Kid-sized, in fact. "We need to leave," she whispered. I grabbed her hand and started running. We took random turns, not really caring about finding the centre anymore, just wanting to get out. But every path now seemed to look back on itself. We'd seen the same scarecrows, the same intersections. Once we passed that clearing with the historical sign, 3 times in 10 minutes. The sun was completely set now. The only light came from a half moon, struggling to break through the clouds. The scarecrows cast long shadows that seemed to move when we weren't looking at them. But that's when we heard the footsteps. Not behind us, ahead. Heavy boots crunching on the dried corn husks. We skidded to a stop, and the footsteps stopped too. Hello? We're lost. Can you help us find the exit? But we were only met by silence. Then slowly, the footsteps started again, coming toward us. We backed up, then turned, and ran the other way. The footsteps followed, always maintaining the same distance, never catching up, but also never falling behind, just following exactly. We ran until my lungs burned, my girlfriend crying now, and gasping for air. We stumbled into another clearing, larger than the others before. 7 scarecrows here, arranged in a circle, and in the centre, a pile of clothes, including a Chicago Bears jacket, smaller than the one we seen before. Oh my god, oh god, oh god, my girlfriend said. Don't look at it, don't. But we both saw it. Among the clothes, something pale. Small fingers. The footsteps were all around us now. Now it was obvious, it wasn't just one side, but several, coming from every path that led into the clearing. And the scarecrows, I could have sworn they were closer than when we first entered. My girlfriend screamed. I turned and saw one of the scarecrows had turned its head. The burlap sack face was looking directly at us. We ran. The corn tore out our clothes and our faces. Behind us we could hear rustling, like something pushing through the stalks, parallel exactly to our path. I honestly don't know how long we ran. It could have been minutes, but it felt like hours. Time definitely felt broke. But eventually, impossibly, we burst out of the maze. Not at the entrance. Somewhere else now. We must have been on the far side of the property, near a collapsed barn that I'd never seen before. We ran for the parking lot, half expecting the footsteps to follow us out, although they didn't. My car was the only one left in the lot. The entrance bit empty, locked up like it was closed for hours. We got in the car and drove straight to the police station, told them about the family, the clothes, and everything else we could. The officer on duty listened, with a patient expression that I didn't like. Hartwell Farm? He asked when I finished. That place was closed years ago. 15, maybe 20 years back. No, I was just there last October. I've been going since. Son, that property's been abandoned since 2005. The owner died, bank foreclosed. Place has been tied up in legal issues ever since. Nobody's run a corn maze there in decades. He did agree to do a welfare check on the family we'd seen. He took the description and said he'd look into it, but I could tell he thought we were on drugs, or playing some kind of joke. We stayed in a motel that night. We didn't speak much, and in the morning I looked up Hartwell Farm online. The original farm did in fact close in 1912. Owner named Hartwell and his family disappeared in October, vanishing during the harvest season. Search parties combed the property for weeks and never found them. But they did find scarecrows, dozens of them, scattered across the fields, wearing clothes that belonged to the farmhands, who'd caught without notice over the years. There were 12 scarecrows in total. That property sat abandoned for decades until in 1975 when a new family bought it and reopened it as a Halloween attraction. They ran it successfully for around 30 years until 2005 when that family disappeared too during harvest season in October. They found 14 scarecrows that time. I called the police station the next day to follow up about the family we'd seen. The officer I spoke to, a different one from the night before, had no record of our visit. No report was filed. And when I described the officer who'd taken our statement, he told me nobody matching that description worked there. My girlfriend and I don't talk about what happened. We're actually not together anymore. We ended up breaking up about a month after that. But sometimes, late in October, I'll get a text from her. No words, just a number. Last year it was 16. This year it was 17. I don't know what she's counting, and I'm too afraid to ask. Because when I drive past the farm, I can't help myself. The corn is still there, even though no one plants it anymore. And on certain nights, when the moon is right, I can see figures in the fields. Scarecrows probably. At least I tell myself they're scarecrows. Even though scarecrows don't usually wave back. My dad hired me to do an autumn cleanup for Mrs. Clark. Down the street, the year I turned 16. He said it was easy money. Just rake leaves, bag them, and haul them to the curb. She'd pay $40 for an afternoon's work. Mrs. Clark was old, like genuinely ancient. She must have been pushing 90. She lived in a house since before my parents were born, back when our street was just farmland. The house reflected that age. A sagging porch, paint peeling like sunburned skin, and windows that looked perpetually dark, even in the daylight. But it was the yard that really stood out. Two massive oak trees dominated the property, easily 100 feet tall. My dad said they were probably 200 years old, maybe older. She'll never cut them down. She says they were here first. The leaves from those oak trees covered everything. We're talking a lawn buried under 2 feet of crispy brown foliage. It would take hours, maybe even multiple days. I showed up on a Saturday morning in late October. Mrs. Clark answered the door before I could even knock, like she'd been waiting for me. Up close she looked even older, paper thin skin, milky eyes, and hands twisted with arthritis. The leaves, she said without preamble. Will you rake them? Yes, ma'am. All of them? That's the plan. Something flickered across her face. Concern, fear. It passed too quickly to tell. Don't rake under the trees, she said. Just the yard. Leave a border around the trunks. 6 feet at least. Okay, but won't that look weird? Leave them. She paid me half up front. Cash from a jar that looked like it had been sitting on the counter since the 70s. Then she shuffled back inside. I heard about 5 locks click into place. I got to work. She wasn't kidding about the depth. In some places, the leaves came right up to my knees. The rake barely made a dent at first, but it was a nice day, cool and clear. And the work was honestly meditative. Rake, pile, bag, repeat. I'd been at it for maybe an hour when I found the first one. It was in a pile I was about to bag. A child's toy. One of those little plastic army men. Faded green, half buried in the leaves. I just tossed it aside and kept working. Then I found an old watch with a cracked leather band. The face had stopped at 3:17. Then I found a shoe, just one, a woman's flat, size 17, according to the label inside. It was dirt stained and mouldy. Then a wallet, the driver's license inside it, expired in 1987. I didn't recognise the name, but the address was somewhat local. I should have been creeped out, should have asked some questions, but I was 16, and $40 was $40. I figured it was just debris that had blown into the yard over the years. People probably use this place as an unofficial dump. By noon, I'd cleared maybe a third of the lawn. The piles of leaves raked to the curb were enormous, at least 20 bags worth. I took a break, drank some water, and surveyed my work. That's when I noticed I'd been unconsciously honouring Mrs. Clark's role, even though I hadn't been trying to. I left a clear border around both trees. The leaves there remained undisturbed. Dave's leaves were noticeably different, darker, wetter somehow, even though it hadn't rained in a week. They glistened in the sunlight with an oily sheen. I walked closer to get a better look. The smell hit me about 4 feet away. Thick, organic rot. Like a compost pile, but worse. Meteor. The leaves moved. Not from the wind. There wasn't any wind. They shifted, a slow ripple spreading from the base of the nearest tree. Something underneath was moving. I backed up, told myself it was a groundhog, or maybe a cat. But the movement was too large for a groundhog, and seemingly too slow for a cat. The leaves rippled again, closer to the edge of the 6-foot border. I could see something beneath them now. A shape, long and low. You're supposed to leave those alone. I spun around. Mrs. Clark stood in her porch, wrapped in a ratty bathrobe, despite the mild temperature. I'm not touching him, I'm just looking. Don't look either. It notices. What notices? But she'd already gone back inside. More locks clicking. I should have left, told her to keep her money, and found some other way. But teenage pride is a hell of a thing, and I wasn't going to be scared off by some weird old lady in her weird old yard. I got back to raking, kept my distance from the trees, tried not to look at the dark, wet leaves beneath them. But I couldn't help notice the pile was bigger than before. The 6-foot border had expanded, more like 7 feet now, maybe 8. By afternoon, I'd cleared another section of the lawn. The pile of bags at the curb was enormous, and I'd found more objects. A pair of glasses, a set of keys, and a cell phone. This was newer than the other stuff. This one could have been from the early 2000s. And a dog collar with tags. I looked at the name, Rusty, from an address 3 blocks away. This is when I really started to feel uneasy. These were seemingly not random pieces of trash. These were things people had lost or left behind. The sun getting lower now, casting long shadows across the lawn. The shadows from the oak trees were enormous, covering most of the remaining leaves. And in those shadows, something moved. I saw it clearly this time. Underneath the leaves, near the base of the first tree, something large shifted. The leaves rose and fell, like something was breathing underneath them. Then I heard it. A sound like pulling, like suction, like something was drawing the leaves towards the tree. Not wind, this was deliberate. The leaves slid across the ground, piling up around the trunk. The 6 feet border was now 10, and growing. I dropped the rake and backed away towards the street. As I did, I saw more clearly what was happening. The leaves weren't just piling up, they were sinking, disappearing into the ground around the tree. As they sank, that wet, organic smell intensified. Mrs. Clark's door opened. "You should go now. It's almost feeding time." Feeding time? They get hungry when the leaves fall. That's when the veil is the thinnest, she said, looking at the darkening sky. "You cleared enough anyway. Made a path. That's all it needs." "A path for what?" I replied. "For people who don't notice. For people who walk by at dusk. Dogs that wander after leashes," she said, glancing at the collar in my hand. "It takes them quick, pulls them under, and by morning there's just pieces, the things it doesn't want." I stared at her and at the trees and the growing darkness beneath their branches. "You're insane." My husband didn't think so, until I tried to cut them down, she said, pointing at the tree. "That one took him. October 23rd, around 6 p.m. That was his watch I'd found. The one stopped at 3:17. She said, "When I found it the next spring, I knew he wasn't coming back." "It's been here longer than the house," Mrs. Clark continued. "Longer than the town. The trees are just markers. What's underneath this is older, hungrier, and every autumn it wakes up, and it needs to be fed before the winter." The leaves rustled behind me. I turned and saw them moving towards the street, toward me, sliding across the ground like a low wave. "Run," Mrs. Clark said, "and don't come back after dark, ever." I ran, left the rake, left the bags, left everything. I ran until I was a couple of blocks away. When I finally stopped and looked back, the street was empty, normal. The sun hadn't even fully set yet. But from a distance, Mrs. Clark's yard looked different. The cleared areas I spent all day working on were covered again. Fresh leaves, thick and dirt, like it'd never been there at all. She mailed me the remaining $20. I tried to return it. Felt wrong for taking money for a job I hadn't completed. She sent it back with a note. "You finished? You made it a path, and it's satisfied for now." I never went back to that house. I crossed the street to avoid walking past it, and I noticed other people did too. Unconscious detours, subtle course corrections, like everyone in the neighbourhood knew, on some level, to avoid the yard. The next spring, I saw a missing person poster at the grocery store. A jogger who'd gone missing in late October, last seen running through the neighbourhood around dusk. They found her ID the autumn after that, half buried in the lead, in Mrs. Clark's. Mrs. Clark died 2 years later, the house sitting empty for a while before the distant relatives sold it. The new owners lasted about 3 months before they moved out. Said they kept finding things in the yard, personal items, things that didn't belong to them. The house has been empty for 5 years now. The bank can't sell it. Every realtor who lists it eventually drops it from their portfolio. But the oak trees are still there, still standing, still dropping their leaves every October. And if you walk past the property at dusk, during the right week, you'll see them. the leaves moving, sliding towards the trees, and underneath them, something waiting, something that's been hungry for a very, very long time. I worked at Grayson's pumpkin patch for 3 seasons before I learned the truth about the field. It was a fall tradition for families within 50 miles. They come to Grayson's, pick your pumpkin, drink cider, take photos in front of the big barn. Old man Grayson had been running it since before I was born, and his father before him. The kind of place that felt wholesome and eternal. I was hired as seasonal help in my junior year of college. It was an easy job. Help people load pumpkins, run the cash register, and give directions to the toilets. The work was mindless, pay was decent, and I got free cider after my shifts. The main patch was about 5 acres, more than enough pumpkins for the crowds that we got, but the property was much larger, probably somewhere around 40 acres in total. Most of it was just empty fields, some scattered equipment, and woods at the very far edge. And there was the backfield. I'd seen it dozens of times, but never really paid it any attention. It was separated from the main patch by a line of trees and an old split rail fence. From a distance, it looked like more pumpkins, but nobody ever went back there. There were no signs pointing to it, and no rail paths. During my second season, I asked about it. That's the old field, said Grayson's daughter. She was my supervisor, a woman in her 40s who'd been helping run the place her whole life. We don't use that anymore. Why not? I asked. She hesitated. Soil's bad. The pumpkins don't grow right there. But I'd seen them. They look fine. Big even. Arguably better than some of the ones in the main patch. Can people pick from there if they want? No. Her tone made it clear the conversation now over. I let it go, but I stayed curious. It was mid-October, peak season, when I finally got a good look at the backfield. I was helping a family load pumpkins into their SUV when their kid, maybe 7, went running off. Before anyone could stop him, he ducked under the split rail fence and was heading for the old field. His mom called after him, but kids that age don't usually have great recall. I jogged after him, figured I'd scoop him up and carry him back. The kid was fast though, and by the time I caught up, he was standing in the middle of the backfield, surrounded by pumpkins, and he was crying now. Hey buddy, it's alright. Let's go back to your mom. He didn't respond, just stood there, tears streaming down his face, staring at the pumpkin nearest to him. I looked at it more closely. It was big, could have been 60 pounds, bright orange, classically shaped, absolutely perfect, except for one thing. There was a face on it, carved, not grown. The features were part of the pumpkin itself, raised and contoured, a nose, a mouth, and eye-like sockets. What the hell? They're sad, the kid said. They're all sad. I looked around, and he was right. Every pumpkin in this field had a face. Not all the same, each one unique, and each one expressing some variant of fear or anguish. Some screaming and some crying. Some looked like they were begging. Come on, I said as I grabbed the kid's hand. We're leaving. I pulled him back to the main patch, his mom now frantic. She thanked me about 100 times. I told her it was no problem and didn't mention the pumpkins. But I found Grayson's daughter, my supervisor, after the shift. "What's wrong with the pumpkins in the backfield?" I asked. Her expression went cold. "You went back there?" "A kid ran off. I had to go get him." She went quiet for a moment. "Come with me then." We walked back to the old barn, the one we used for storage. She unlocked the side door that I had never seen open and led me down a narrow staircase. At the bottom was a small room, maybe 10 by 10. The walls were covered in old newspapers, old ones, like some dating back to the 50s. "Read them," she said, and I did. The first one was from October 1952. "Local farmer missing after harvest." The article described how a neighbouring farmer had vanished from his property during pumpkin season. Search parties found nothing. The next was from 1961. "Woman disappears from roadside stand." She'd been selling produce near the highway. Someone had found her. Stand abandoned. Money still in the cash box. 1973. Teenager vanishes from Halloween festival. 1985. Couple goes missing after visiting pumpkin patch. 1992. Child disappears from Grayson property. There were dozens of them, all from October, all from within a 10-mile radius, all people who'd vanished without explanation. My grandfather started documenting them, she said, after he realised what was going on. "What do you mean, what was going on?" "The field takes him," she said matter-of-factly. "It started in the late 40s. My great-grandfather was the first. He planted that backfield despite warnings, well, local legends, indigenous stories about the land. He didn't believe in that stuff. The pumpkins grew strange that first year, misshapen. Tried to plough them under and start fresh, but the next year they came back, and they had faces." I waited for her to continue. "People then started disappearing, never from the property itself, but always nearby, always in October. My grandfather finally made the connection. Every time someone went missing, a new face would appear in the field." "That's insane." "Is it? You seen them?" I had, and I couldn't really explain what I'd seen. "What do you do?" I asked. "You can't just let this keep happening." "Well, we keep people away from the field. That's all we can do. As long as nobody picks the pumpkins and nobody harvests them, it stays contained. But if somewhere were to take one..." "What happens if someone takes one?" "We don't know. And we're not going to find out. You don't go back there. Ever. And you don't tell anyone about this. Understand?" I nodded. But I was already planning to go back. Around 3 nights later, I returned to the property after closing. I hopped the fence, walked across the dark fields to the back patch. I brought a flashlight and my phone camera. I was going to document this and then figure out what to do. The faces were worse at night. The flashlight beam made the shadows on them deeper, making the expressions more pronounced. I walked slowly through the field, counting them as I went. 52 pumpkins. 52 faces. I stopped at one near the centre of the field. The face looked familiar. It took me a moment to place it. Then I remembered the person who went missing from 2 years ago. The one whose picture had been on every telephone pole in town. The pumpkin had her face. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Grayson's daughter. I know you're out there. Leave, now. I ignored it, moving deeper into the field. The largest pumpkin was at the very back, near the tree line. It was huge, easily 100 pounds. Its face different from the others. It was smiling, not a happy smile, a hungry one. As I stared at it, I realized something. The other faces were all looking at this one. Every single pumpkin orientated towards this central giant, like they were watching it or afraid of it. My phone buzzing again. Another text. It knows you're out there. Get out. The pumpkin smiled, started to widen. Then I heard it. A sound like breathing. Deep, wet, coming from the ground beneath the pumpkin. The earth around it began to shift and crack. Something was moving underneath. I ran. Didn't think, just ran. Behind me, I could hear it. Something large, pulling itself from the soil. The sound of breaking roots. The squelch of disturbed earth. I didn't look back. Made it to my car and tore out of the parking lot. My phone buzzing non-stop. Grayson's daughter calling over and over. I finally answered. Are you clear of the property? She asked. Yes, I replied. Then listen to me carefully. Don't come back, ever. You're fired. If I see you here again, I'm calling the police. Do you understand? What was that thing? I asked. The seed. The source. Everything else in that field came from it. My grandfather tried to destroy it once, doused it in gasoline, and set it on fire. It just came back twice the size the next morning, and 3 people went missing. You have to tell someone. The police, the government. And say what? We have a magical evil pumping that eats everything? Who would believe us? They just shut us down, developed land, and people would die. Lots of people. At least this way, we have it contained. That's insane, I replied. Yes, it is, but it's also reality. The field's been here longer than the town, than the state. We're not getting rid of it, we're just managing it. And with that, she hung up. I, of course, never went back to Grayson's pumpkin patch. I finished school, moved across the country, and tried to forget. But around this time every year, I check the news from the area, and like clockwork, someone goes missing. And I think about the field, about the faces in the dark, about the thing beneath the smiling pumpkin. Grayson's pumpkin patch is still open, still popular. Families still come from miles around to pick pumpkins and drink cider. And in the backfield, hidden behind the tree line, the pumpkins continue to grow. 52 faces this year. I'd bet maybe 55. And one of them is smiling. Always smiling.